Okay, kia ora Marcus, welcome to Aotearoa Actual. So you are a environmental resource iwi manager, and you're also a local historian. Can you give us some background on your...
Sure. So currently I'm involved with the iwi in a number of ways. We're in our treaty claim process. Over the last few years we've been developing our constitution, rewriting our history, teaching and educating our whānau and our kura. We've also been pretty active in helping to restore the health of our rivers, our whenua. We've got some very serious erosion problems, the Trinder slip, for example, being the largest landslip in the southern hemisphere. So working very actively now to try and improve the conditions of our whenua and our awa and our wai. Now I've also had the opportunity to stand front line in places like Standing Rock and protecting water with other indigenous peoples. And I was able to take a few months and walk the North Island for water as well, highlighting the issues that we have currently around water bottling, for example, or over-allocation of our aquifer, and the issues around the dairy industries and the things that are happening with all the waters. So we're also developing our constitution as it relates to our post-settlements governance entity, and deciding how we're going to govern ourselves and assert our tino rangatira, essentially.
So, on Tuesday, the Her Majesty's Bark Endeavour is going to be berthing right here in Gisborne. They're not leaving it out at sea like they did in 1769. They're actually going to bring it in and physically berth it at the wharf. Are you able to give us a background of the history that happened in 1769? I believe they landed on the 7th of October the first time, and also Cook landed on the 8th. So are you able to describe the first day Cook landed in Aotearoa?
Yeah, for sure. So I call it the decolonised tour of Aotearoa, starting at the beach on which Cook and his Marines first set foot here in the Tairāwhiti in Tūranga-nui-a-Kiwa. My whakapapa directly is through Rongo Whakaata to the very beaches on which Cook came, and then engaged with my tipuna, viciously in fact, as he did engage. So, when Captain Cook first came into port, there are monuments of this young Nick in bronze pointing to Te Kuria Pawa, which is young Nick's head. It's essentially a white cliff face that young Nick saw out to sea, which signalled that they had found land. They discovered this New Zealand, they called. And so as they came into shore and they sort of settled into the bay, and they were looking for a place to come ashore, right? They were looking to see if there were peoples here and if they could engage with them. And I assumed that they had all of these scientific and trading reasons for which they were going to do this. When Cook came ashore, they hopped off the Endeavour and got one of the rowboats, made their way in. There was Cook and a number of his officers, a marine and sailors. They landed in what we call now Kaiti Beach, at the base of Titirangi or Kaiti Hill. And on the beach there, Cook left a marine and one of the sailors. They noticed that there was a stream, Waikanai stream, and that the best signs of a village looked to be up that stream, and there was across from where they were. So they left the marine with instructions, I guess, to just hold tight, hold fast, while Captain Cook and his officers then sailed their rowboat up the stream. As they were heading up the stream, Cook heard a shot ring out from behind him. And so immediately, I guess, must have been struck by something's gone wrong, something's happening here. A second shot rang out, and then Cook knew it was pretty serious. So he turned the boat around and came back. And then a third shot rang out. By the time he got back, there was laying dead on the ground Te Maro, one of the rangatira and Maoris who had come out from Titirangi to see who these people were. Of course, Te Maro and his people were all watching as the Endeavour came in anyway, so they recognised there was something happening. This new ship, pretty much unlike anything that they had seen. And so, as is probably our custom, came forward with a whittle. And in performing of the whittle, the Marine, it seemed, had no idea what was about to happen. And probably typical of the type, cowered underneath the fear of what was coming at him, and not knowing how to respond, immediately picked up his musket. Now, the first shot, as I understand it, was a warning shot. And then Te Maro continuing to advance, perhaps holding back for a second, wondering what this loud lightning crack was. But continued. It was Te Maro's way. I believe that he was doing what he was meant to in the whittle, testing the hearts of those that he was seeing to see what their intentions were. So the Marine again fired a warning shot, and then as Te Maro continued to advance, it's my belief that the Marine feared for his life, is what they say in Cook's journals more particularly, I guess, and so lowered his gun to the chest of Te Maro and then fired and shot him. Te Maro dropped dead at his feet. When Captain Cook returned and recognising that something drastic had happened, I do feel that Cook was a little bit upset and distraught. I don't believe that was his intent, but that's what happened. And so interesting, it says that when Cook came to the body, they placed a blanket over Te Maro and then put 2 pennies on his eyelids, which is more typical, I guess, of the European sort of traditions of paying the ferryman as you cross over the river Styx. Interesting that they would do that at that moment. Probably the first act of colonisation, or second act after a bullet, is to try and impinge or push their own, theological boundaries upon our own people, because of course God Himself is English according to the principles, perhaps. So, upon recognising that, something didn't go according to Cook's plan, I assumed that he had these great visions of himself standing on the front of his boat, walking, sailing up to the village, and the people perhaps clapping and applauding, and it didn't work out like he expected. They then hopped back on, rowed back out to the Endeavour, and then I guess took time to think about what are they going to do next, what had happened. He wrote that in his journal. So it was probably believed that was going to sort of mess up that day, so they decided to wait another day. They had on board Tupaia, the Tahitian, and the Tahitian that they picked up, who already recognised and knew that there were people here, because they asked Tupaia what did he know of these people. Tupaia was a little bit intimidated. He recognised that these Maori were not to be messed with, and so there is some aspects of him sharing that concern to Cook about the mindfulness. And so Tupaia himself, I guess, realises that they needed to be mindful and careful how they approach Maori in general. So they decided that they would wait another day and that they would come back and that they would bring Te Maro in and hope that Te Maro could then communicate with the people, express their regret. Tupaia, sorry. So Tupaia would then come in with Cook, and then that he would then express the regret that Cook had for what had happened the day before. So day 2 comes. They come on shore. Now in the middle of Gisborne port there was a rock called Te Toko-a-Taia, and essentially it was covered the whole area of space. And Cook came in. Now by this stage a war party had been assembled. Because of what had happened to Te Maro, they had gone and gathered in a number of the toa, the warriors, and so there were a group that were ready and waiting on shore. And Te Rako, one of the rangatira, was leading that band. As Cook came ashore onto the rock, Te Toko-a-Taia, and Tupaia then began to engage, explaining, I guess, the regret and so on, perhaps. he was able to actually get it to a point where it was agreed that Cook and Te Rākau would meet. And so, as they were perhaps coming together on Te Tuku-a-Taia, the war party began haka. And for a group of sailors, I guess, who had not encountered the more warlike and powerful nature of Maori warriors, it was a demonstration of, our mana. So Cook, in his infinite wisdom, I guess, decided that perhaps he should also demonstrate his power. And so he did order his Marines to fire a volley into the river, give him a feel for what we have. So I guess his thoughts. And so it was quite shocking when the warriors had heard that here is this white man coming in these big clouded ships, the sails looking like, and then holding the power of the atua in their hands, calling on lightning in an instant. You can imagine that it was something that they had never encountered before. And so after a few, I guess, pleasantries, there was a point when Te Rākau and Cook came together and there was a hongi. So it's spoken of here. In fact, the most heard thing I've heard about Cook is this wonderful hongi that happened between Te Rākau and Cook. And there came the breathing of this new life. That was way before I ever heard that Te Maro was killed the day before. It seemed like maybe perhaps it was going to become a good encounter. That perhaps there could be something that could come of this. And so I guess they let down their guard. One of Cook's officers had a hanger, what they call a sword, at his hip. And as he turned around, Te Rākau saw it, and being a warrior of some renown, recognised that here was a weapon, reached to it and then pulled it out. And as he pulled it out, he turned back to his warriors to show them this taiaha, this metal taiaha. And as he turned and showed it, the officer lowered his pistol into the back of Te Rākau and shot him. Now, my own interpretation is that for an English officer never gives up his gun. To do so is the worst thing possible. It's no different to a Maori who gets his taiaha taken from him. More shame to have your taiaha taken from you than to be killed by a taiaha. And so, in that instance, the officer, I believe, rashly assumed that, and it's written in the diary actually, that they believed Te Rākau was stealing his sword. And so, lowered his gun to his back and shot him. Te Rākau fell dead, and the warriors had no idea what was happening. They didn't recognise what was going on at that moment. All of a sudden they heard this large crack, Once again, an atua was invoked, and now Te Rākau was lying motionless. There were others who came forward to sort of try to see why is he having this lie down? Why is he asleep? And it's interesting that they left him there for a whole day. At that point, a few scuffles began to break out, and the intensity started to rise. And that moment on Te Tuku-a-Taia, which started with a hongi, ended up with the Marines firing a volley of shots into the war party, and at least 5 to 7 more were killed at that moment. And not a worse welcome and introduction to British colonialism could have been presented than that one right there, at that moment in this country and in this town with our tipuna. And so Cook, realising it had just gone to custard here, that everything just fell apart, grabbed everybody, they hopped back on their boats, went back out to the Endeavour, leaving a mess behind him. And then there are some who say that Cook also took an opportunity to go to the beach and to plant the flag, the Union Jack, and in the name of King George claim the land. It's not specifically written, but it is referred to in historical records, and it seems to me that that would be one of the prime things that they would be doing, make the world England, right? Cook then hopped on his ship, realised that they had messed up, there wasn't going to be much going to come out of this moment. And then they waited. The third day, more action occurred. They went further into the bay, away from Waikanai Beach and that main area that they had come to. And there they encountered a small waka with 3 young men on it. And they pulled the 3 young men on board. Now, this is the bit where some say that they were actually kidnapped them. Perhaps they were trying to use them as collateral for what had happened. It is said that those 3 were very curious and quite interested in who these people were. At some point, it was agreed that they would actually have to let these young men go, and so they were going to take them back to the shore where they had initially had the contact. And the 3 young men were adamant not to be sent, not to be dropped off there, because that was a different tribe and that they were not friendly. So I believe those 3 were from the tribe in Maitamanihiri. And so it's interesting that there's that little dynamic as well. There's more in this, of course, and after that moment, so first of all we see that there was killings, and then mass killings, and then kidnapping, and then cultural, pushing their own views.
What's the estimates of the people that were killed at first contact?
So the total estimate is between 7 and 12. We know at least 7, but because Cook didn't write down a list of every individual, it was referred to as being around those numbers.
So how many was it on the first day?
First day was Tamara.
Just one person?
Yep.
And then on the second day, that was the remaining 6?
Yep. Yeah, Tarako plus some of the other warriors.
Do you feel that there's been kind of a bit of whitewashing of that first contact moment, that it's been portrayed as this beautiful moment where Pākehā meet Maori and everything's peaceful and it just was a fairy tale?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, after all of this went down, Cook himself decided that they would have to lift anchor and head out and perhaps go and find another place to come ashore. And they had expected to name the bay Endeavour Bay. And as they were leaving, I guess one of the officers said to Cook, well, shall we name it Endeavour Bay as we had intended? And Cook turned to him and says, no, there is nothing for us here, so we shall call it Poverty Bay. And it was then labelled Poverty Bay from that day ever since. A bay so full of life, so full of food, so full of every resources that our people needed, was then branded poverty, and it has been stuck in that mire ever since. Since I've been here, since I've lived and grown up in Te Tairawhiti and Tūranga-nui-a-Kiwa, there was a romanticism that had been presented, a whitewashing and a sanitisation of the true history and story. And we can see it straight away. Why there's absolutely no reference to the name Te Maro o Tarako on any monuments down on the beach, that the references try to minimise the impact in its language of what had occurred there. That there were two statues of Captain Cook and one of young Nick, and not a single statue or reference to the Maori and those who had been slain. There's barely a reference to the old kainga, the pā site, that was there as well. But this was I believe a systematic attempt to colonise, starting right at the heart here in Tūranga, and presented as a clear, fresh new land, a blank slate on which the empire could then be built and a new world presented.
I noticed at the first landing site where the monument is, that was built in 1903, and it's very British looking. It's got British architecture around it, and then you have other kind of statues erected in the 21st century that show that there was a Maori component to this. So from the perception I got is, through the 20th century, it looked like there was only one team here, one side of this story.
Or minimise the position of the tangata whenua, of course. So the effect of Cook's arrival and the consequent colonisation wasn't really that bad. In fact, shouldn't it have been a way of showing how Māori were elevated by the presence of the colonial empire, and because of their primitive nature, that it was a fortunate thing that technologies and new ideas and philosophies and energies was presented. Not further from the truth could you get about the competencies of our ancestors here, who for thousands of years had already sailed the entire Pacific Ocean before the English Empire had even been established. Our ancestors were already mastered sailing thousands of kilometres. They had science and technology and astronomy. They were people of cultivation and gardening and growing and fishing. They knew the tides and the seasons. So they were truly the true masters of the Pacific, which wouldn't look too well, though, if you've just claimed to be the discoverer of the Pacific, and that your great advancements in science, the Royal Academy of Sciences, for example, which is meant to be the pinnacle of human evolution, because the greatest minds ever were sitting in that Royal Academy of Sciences and sending out its emissaries to the world to shine the light and show, look how much civilization we have. And it doesn't help when there's a group of people who are much more smarter and more capable and agile in mind than yourself. So you have to take things and you have to sort of whitewash, or you have to reposition those original indigenous peoples as being not able to speak English. How can you be civilized if you can't even speak English? So Gisborne has weltered underneath this because it was built by the colonists. Now I say this very bluntly because my great-great-great-great-grandfather was William Tucker, was captain of the militia of the colonial forces which instituted the Tūranga Wars. He was also the one who blew up Te Toko-a-Taia, which was that initial rock on which Captain Cook and Te Rākau came, so that they could put a port in there and allow the river access to this ocean so that boats could come and go, which is why the monument is on the beach, probably about 100 metres away from the actual spot that it's meant to be commemorating.
So he literally destroyed his own culture and the position of where the British first standard.
Well, they put a monument up.
Yeah, but the actual bit of land,
yeah.
he went and destroyed it.
Well, that's my question is, if the significance of Captain Cook's arrival here was of such importance and value to this country, well, my colonial ancestors didn't seem to have the same high standard, because they were quite willing to get rid of one of those most established points of contact so that we could put a port through there. Of course, that port now services millions of logs, pine logs, which again are not native either, back and forth to China. So I guess we have William Tucker to thank for some of that.
So do you think that there's been a lot of Maori history forgotten?
Yeah.
Deliberately?
Yeah, no, it was intentional. There was no value in Maori history. It's of a bygone age and of a place and a time which is not relevant to the world in which we now live. So let's not spend a lot of time trying to understand that past. Let's help us understand that we're moving into a new colonial world, and that's more important for us. The English system, the educational system, that was given to my ancestors here, essentially was there to try and make them the best colonials that they could be, and eventually lighten up their skins, and we won't have to hear much about it. Of course, the New Zealand Herald had an article in the early 1900s which predicted the demise of all Māori within 10 years. They were predicting and foreseeing that there would be no more Māori, so that all that could be done was to smooth the feathered pillow of a dying race, make their demise easy, acknowledge the historicity of them, and they'll be out of the way soon. So what do we do now? Well, no one's going to complain about the land that we now have confiscated, because they won't be here. Unfortunately, the gene pool amongst Māori was a little bit too strong, and they now have to confront the truth that a lot of what has been given us has been a lot of bollocks. My tipuna that lived out here, and those who have come through the consequence of all of this, have had to fight daily to recognise you know, the mana and pride that's within who we are as a people.
So that's an effect of colonisation from the 7th of October 1769.
Yeah.
The local folks around here, they've struggled from that day forward.
Yeah, that's right.
Through colonisation, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what happened on the beach wasn't only what happened on the beach. What happened on the beach was the first catalyst moment which opened up a wave of consequences, actions that were going to undermine the mana and the integrity of our whole entire race of Maori, of which we're still dealing with the consequences of this day. Total misunderstandings, total lack of respect and appreciation. In fact, as an example, this is yesterday, here in Wharaturu, we're on tank supply water. The tanker driver came out to fill up the water. We had a little discussion. He asked the question, so what do you think of all of these events about Captain Cook? I said, well, what do you think about it? Now, he is a European. He is a local boy. He's a descendant of a colonist. And he says, you know, some of these white men are getting a little upset at all this noise. You know, why can't we just get over this? And I'm like, to this very day in my house here is the same attitude. With all the information, he has no information. With a world where the internet gives you no excuse not to know what's going on, there are people who don't know what's going on. It's not because they don't have access to it, it's because they choose not to want to know what's going on. It's because this entire town is built upon a lie. And that lie is starting to crumble, and people are feeling very uncomfortable about their own position within it. But it has to come down. So what's amazing to see is the first of the monuments which remember and acknowledge Te Maro, Te Rākau, and our tipuna who were slain. Now, why now? 250 years after that moment, 2019, it's taken this long to have one monument erected in honour of our own people. Crazy.
Okay, that's it. That's a cut.
All right.